Hey there, Trailblazers. Welcome back to another episode 55. I'm Nan, this ESL Trailblazer. Let's make something happen. Let's build that momentum. Burn to learn. Yeah. So this week, self-development, training, education. That's what it's all about. That's what ESL Trailblazer is all about. So I want to emphasize it in this episode. Teaching. It's not an easy job. People don't respect us. We need to get our respect back. I've talked about this before. Here's a quote for you. Okay? The mediocre teacher tells. The good teacher explains. The superior teacher demonstrates. The great teacher, what do? They inspire. That's right. And that sounds easier said than done, a nice English expression, but I'd like to talk about that in today's episode. I want to talk about assessment versus evaluation. I want to talk about the different types of learning that we can do when we're learning language, as well as the different types of learning we can do when we want to develop as teachers, as well as some fantastic, spot-on vocabulary for education and building a career. Building a career. Building a career. I'll be right back after this message. And we're back. Let's get right into it without further ado. Let's start with assessment versus evaluation, which is something that is very dear to my heart because when I studied about teaching, I learned the very significant difference between the two because it is always mixed up. People don't think there's a difference. There is. And in teaching, it's a significant difference, but I think it also applies to business. So if you're a professional listening, this might be valuable to you. So let's get it started and get it done. Assessment. Let's talk about it. Assessment is for a teacher when at the beginning of the year you are checking to see, identifying what the strengths and weaknesses are of your students. By determining the strengths and weaknesses of your students, you are able to build a curriculum, a syllabus, a teaching plan for the year, the semester, the quarter, appropriately that is adequate to your students' needs because now you know what those needs are. Very important to have this assessment. In the business world, the assessment is going to be, if it's used correctly, is going to be the same idea to identify the strengths and weaknesses and how a company, an organization, a team can improve and build on. Then we go to the evaluation part. The evaluation part is what happens later on, where here there's a grade. In school there's a grade. This is the test. This is where you see if you have learned anything, if you have improved. The teacher sees if you have improved, sees if their teaching technique or what they choose to teach actually worked and helped the students in their weaknesses and maybe refining their strengths. In the business world, this is also going to be a grade, something where there's value added to what's being checked in order to see if there's been improvement or profits are up or whatever else that they're measuring for depending on the company and business. So I feel like that explanation should be clear for all of you out there who are curious about those differences. These are very closely linked to training and self-improvement and self-development and learning, especially in language learning. All right, so let's move on to the different ways we can learn. Now, a lot of people learning English or other languages have to make a decision from the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, or whenever that's ending, because in my opinion, it never ends. How they're going to learn a language. Is it going to be self-study? Is it going to be one-on-one, face-to-face, in a group, online, or learning by doing? Learning by doing in this context of language is, of course, learning by speaking with others, conversing with others. Okay, that's how you learn, by using the language. Learn by using, let's say, for the language learners out there. So, in my personal opinion, from my experience, I am speaking ESL Trailblazer here. I am telling you that there's no size fits all. All right? Students like to have and use their preference. A lot of mine have said that they prefer self-study. But I'm here to tell you, self-study is not going to work very well for a long period of time with language learning. Maybe it will help with a little bit of recycling of vocabulary or maybe some grammar structures, but that's all. You're going to have to move on from it sooner or later. And that's why my personal opinion is that you use all of these a little bit. Now, that sounds like a simple solution, but it's not. You just have to gradually move from one to another depending on your needs, okay, assessment, and strengths and weaknesses. You have to be able to identify them in order to decide what you need to work on. A lot of students prefer to pay for individual lessons so they can get from teachers like myself individual attention to improve these weaknesses that they have in their language. Makes sense? Totally logical, reasonable. However, I would like to emphasize that even if you like your teacher, your tutor, your private tutor who's giving you these lessons, you're eventually going to get into a comfort zone. And you know what happens when you get into a comfort zone? You don't grow. So, or develop or improve. So it's very important to be able to, maybe not overuse the word identify, but realize when it's time to move on. Use the individual lessons for a time to help improve certain weaknesses, especially in the communicative aspect when you're trying to communicate. But again, if you're just talking to one person the whole time, that's not going to allow you to grow, because you still need to practice your communication with strangers, in a presentation, with groups of people, and with other people. It's going to be different if you don't know them very well compared to your teacher. Okay? So keep that in mind. It's another thing you need to move on. Online, obviously, I don't need to go into. That can be an option depending on where you live and commuting and all those things. Learning by doing or learning by using the language is, for me, the best example. And this is the one that's going to make you feel like you've made the most improvement as a language learner. I think a lot of people will admit, listening to this or from their own experiences, that when you actually are doing the work in a company or when you're actually using the language, that's when you see that what your errors are and improve. The more you use it, the better, the more confident you become. So, that's all I have to say about that. Again, it is a preference, and there's going to be certain ways of doing it that are better for some than others. But I would like to share in the language learning context, okay, and personal development. So, that's all I want to cover for today's episode, but remember to stay tuned for the one that's coming up next, because that episode, Building a Career, is language-based for anybody out there who's looking for language when they're talking about applying to a university or applying for a job or taking a speaking examination. This language can make you sound a lot more fluent and sophisticated. So stay tuned for that episode coming up. It's a 2-part series. You just saw the first one. Don't miss the next one. Remember to click on the link below if you're interested in the Freshen Up Fridays newsletter that has a lot more tips, hints, teaching blog, and information from my students that I have learned. So sign up if you're interested. Thanks again for following, and subscribe if you haven't. Share with those who you think will find this valuable. I hope you have a great week. Be proud teachers. Make something happen. And we'll be back very soon with another episode. Take care, guys. See ya.